The cream-colored envelope had sat untouched on my kitchen counter for days, its golden script gleaming each morning like a challenge I wasn't ready to face. Inside was an invitation, not just to my mother's extravagant 55th birthday gala, but to a truth I had long buried. A cryptic handwritten note read, "Your presence is required. Come learn your fate." I didn't know it yet, but that envelope was the key to unraveling a legacy built on secrets, lies, and betrayal. I don't know what kind of day you've had, but I'm glad you're here. Breathe, sip, and if you're still with us, comment 1. For 3 days, I'd avoided it, pretending I hadn't seen the thick paper with its gilded calligraphy that practically screamed my name. Each morning, it caught the sunlight just enough to mock me, a constant reminder of the world I had left behind, and the one I had never truly escaped. My mother, Vivian Mack, was a master of appearances, always pristine, always in control. She had spent most of my life sculpting me into her perfect daughter, poised, pastel-dressed, and painfully obedient. But I had broken the mold years ago, choosing a life of canvas, color, and creation, a life she dismissed as a waste of time. I hadn't seen her in person since the last family event, where she humiliated me in front of an entire room of her elite friends by calling my art a hobby at best. I remembered the heat rising in my cheeks as she laughed, glass of champagne in hand, while I stood frozen, the weight of shame pressing on my chest like stone. So no, I wasn't eager to return to her world, especially not for a birthday masquerading as a royal summit. Still, something about the note inside the envelope chilled me. Come learn your fate. Who writes that to their child? I might have ignored it altogether if my cousin Grayson hadn't sent me a text the next morning. Did you open it yet? The urgency in his message was unusual. Grayson wasn't the type to get dramatic. That was the nudge I needed. I finally tore the envelope open, its luxurious texture oddly heavy in my hands. The invitation was expected. Over the top, gold lettering, cursive font, and embossed crest. But it was the handwritten note from Vivian that made my stomach twist. Her words weren't just cryptic. They felt like a threat disguised as formality. And somehow I knew this gala wasn't just about a birthday. Later that night, Sophie, my best friend and personal anchor, dropped by uninvited. She immediately noticed the opened envelope on the counter and raised an eyebrow. "You're going, right?" she asked without hesitation. "I don't know," I muttered. "Last time I went to one of these, she mocked me in front of everyone. I can't handle another night like that." Sophie crossed her arms. "Maybe this time you don't go to hide. You go to face her. Maybe you go for yourself." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Grayson. This time he called. "You need to listen to me," he said, his voice low. "Leon, our grandmother's lawyer, called me. He mentioned your grandmother's letter, the one you've been avoiding." I froze. The letter. The one I had kept hidden away in a locked drawer ever since Grandma Elizabeth's passing. I hadn't dared open it. It felt like a final message I wasn't ready to read. "He didn't say much," Grayson continued, "but he made it clear, that letter, it matters now." Sophie, hearing this name, Letter, looked at me curiously. "What letter, Morgan?" The gnawing unease that had lived in my chest for weeks finally broke through. I walked across the room, my breath shallow, and reached for the desk drawer I hadn't touched in months. The old key felt cool in my palm as I turned the lock. Inside, right where I left it, was the letter, edges frayed from my restless fingers over the months. I unfolded it carefully. My grandmother's handwriting, so familiar and elegant, spoke like a whisper through time. "When the time comes, you will need to be brave. You will face a moment when everything will change. Trust yourself. You are ready." And just like that, I knew. The gala wasn't just an invitation, it was a summons. The moment I finished reading my grandmother's letter, something shifted inside me. The fear that had once kept me from attending my mother's events was still there, but now it was laced with purpose. This wasn't just about enduring another night of condescending remarks and forced smiles. This was something bigger. Grandma Elizabeth had known this moment would come. Her words, "You are ready," echoed louder than my doubts. And so, I decided to go. That evening, as Sophie helped me pick a dress, I chose a deep emerald green gown. It wasn't just beautiful, it was bold. Sharp lines, confident color, unapologetically me. Not the pastel pink my mother had always insisted on. That had been her favorite color, soft, delicate, submissive. But I wasn't going to be delicate tonight. I was going to show up as the woman she refused to acknowledge. Sophie, ever composed, wore a sleek black dress and pulled her hair into a flawless bun. She looked like she belonged at any high society function, and she did. But behind her polished appearance was a mind sharper than any blade. She was already making plans, working behind the scenes to help me uncover the real reason for this gala. Grayson met us at the entrance of the Grand Plaza, the venue my mother had rented for the night. The building stood tall and glittering, its glass walls glowing like a crown in the city skyline. Inside, the ballroom looked like something out of a movie, chandeliers dripping crystal, gold accents gleaming under the lights, a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. But beneath all that glitter, the tension in the air was undeniable. "She's going all out tonight," Grayson whispered, adjusting his cufflinks. Leighton called again. He says everything is in place. He didn't explain what that meant, but he sounded serious. Sophie had already pulled out her laptop, barely glancing at the guests as her fingers danced across the keys. "I hacked into the event planner's database," she said casually. "I've got the full guest list." I blinked. "You what?" She grinned. "You'll want to see this." She turned the screen toward me and my breath caught. CEOs, government officials, foreign investors, every major contact our family had ever worked with was here tonight. This wasn't just a birthday party. This was a power move, a show of control. Or perhaps a distraction. Just as I was processing what that meant, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was. Riker, my ex. He stood at the bar, his expression unreadable, the same calm detachment he always wore. But something was different. His eyes scanned the room like he was searching for an exit or an escape. "You look different tonight, Morgan," he said softly. "You sure about all this?" I nodded, steadying my breath. "I'm sure." Before either of us could say more, the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the stage. Vivian Mack, my mother, stepped into the spotlight, glowing in her designer gown, her voice smooth and calculated. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Tonight, I have something important to announce." I gripped my phone tighter. It was time. The room held its breath as my mother addressed the crowd, her voice smooth like silk, her every word calculated. She spoke of legacy, of power, of preserving the Mac name for generations to come. But I wasn't listening anymore, not really. My focus was on the phone in my hand, my thumb hovering just above the screen. Sophie gave me the smallest nod. "Now." I pressed the button. Within seconds, the ripple began. Phones buzzing across the ballroom, brows furrowing, whispers spreading like wildfire. The truth was out. Everything we had gathered, documents, emails, financial trails, shell accounts, all of it had just gone live. I stepped forward, walking toward the stage. My mother's smile faltered the moment she saw me, her eyes flicking down to her own phone. As the first wave of shock crossed her face, I took the microphone. "I think it's time you check your phone, Vivian," I said, my voice steady. Chaos erupted. Guests pulled out their phones, gasps echoing around the room. Politicians were already moving toward the exits. Investors whispered furiously into their devices. And in the center of it all, my mother stood frozen, her carefully constructed empire crumbling in real time. I laid it bare. "You've embezzled millions, forged documents, manipulated our family's business to serve yourself. And now, the world knows." She lunged for me, grabbing my arm with a vice grip. "What have you done?" she hissed, her face twisted with rage. "I told the truth," I said, pulling away. But the unraveling wasn't over, not even close. As security moved in and the FBI finally made their entrance, led by Agents Carter and Rodriguez, I thought the worst was behind us, that we had done enough. But I was wrong. Grayson approached, pale and shaken. "I found something," he said. "In Grandma's estate, documents she kept hidden. They connect Dad's death to the company. He was investigating her before he died, Morgan." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Our father, always curious, always cautious, hadn't died in an accident? Then came the message. My phone buzzed again, an email from an unknown sender with no subject line, only a few chilling words. "Go to the lake house. Your grandmother knew." Attached was a video file. I opened it, my breath catching as my grandmother's face appeared. Her voice, though aged and strained, still carried the same calm authority. "If you're watching this, then everything has come to light. But there is one last piece of the truth you must uncover. Go to the boathouse. Behind the third panel on the east wall, you'll find what was hidden. Trust only yourself." That was all I needed. "We have to go," I told Sophie and Grayson. "Now." The moment was surreal. Vivian being led away in cuffs. Riker watching from a distance, unreadable. Leighton, the family lawyer, simply nodded at me, as if he had known this moment would come. The drive to the lake house was soaked in silence and storm. Rain pelted the windshield, wind howled like a warning. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever lay waiting behind that wooden panel, I would find it. Because this wasn't just about my mother anymore. This was about a legacy much darker and much bigger than I had ever imagined. The lake house loomed in the storm like a ghost from my childhood. Familiar, yet strangely ominous. Wind howled through the trees as we pulled up beside the boathouse. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were here for the truth, and whatever came with it. Sophie found the third panel on the east wall almost immediately. With Grayson's help, she pried it loose, revealing a hidden compartment, dusty and untouched. Inside was a thick file folder, its edges yellowed with age. She laid the documents across a table. What we found shattered everything: secret bank accounts, coded communications, death certificates, including one for our father, labeled accidental, but the file told a different story. The name Project Legacy appeared repeatedly, connected to politicians, law enforcement, and multinational corporations. This wasn't just about my mother, it was a global conspiracy, and my father had been silenced for getting too close. Before we could fully process what we had uncovered, headlights cut through the storm, black SUVs, too late. "Move!" Grayson shouted, pulling me toward the back exit. We ran through the rain, ducking into the narrow storm tunnel beneath the cottage. But footsteps thundered behind us. Then, out of the shadows, he appeared. Uncle James. Alive. I froze. "You died." They said. "No," he sneered. I disappeared, and I stayed gone for a reason. Behind him, Riker emerged, gun in hand. His calm facade was gone, replaced with cold menace. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the chest. "You were with them all along," I whispered. "You were never meant to find this," Riker said, finger tightening on the trigger. "You're just another piece on the board." But before he could act, sirens pierced the air. FBI agents stormed the property, shouting commands. Gunfire erupted, the tunnel became chaos. Grayson pulled me aside as agents swarmed James and Riker. Riker went down, wounded. James was restrained, his eyes burning with fury. Through the haze, I saw Vivian, too, being dragged toward a waiting vehicle, her gown soaked, and her face pale with defeat. "Project Legacy isn't finished," she spat. But she was wrong. We had the evidence, the names, the files. And now the world would know. This was the end of their shadow empire, and the beginning of mine. The trial was swift, the evidence undeniable. With Project Legacy dismantled and its operatives in custody, the courtroom became the final stage for the truth. Vivian Mack, once untouchable, now sat silent and pale beneath the harsh courtroom lights. Her empire had crumbled. The world now knew what she had done. When the judge delivered the sentence, 20 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy, she didn't flinch. But I noticed the slight tremor in her hand, the way her eyes searched the room for something she couldn't name. Control? Redemption? It didn't matter. As the guards prepared to escort her out, she turned to me one last time. Her voice, surprisingly calm, broke through the silence. "You're stronger than I ever was, Morgan." For a moment, the bitterness that had lived in me for so long faded. I saw her not as the flawless, calculating woman she had always portrayed, but as someone who had been trapped in her own web for far too long. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it made her final words feel almost human. Still, her legacy would not define me. I walked out of that courtroom with more than justice. I walked out with purpose. I could have taken the wealth left behind. I could have restored the Mac name in my image. But I chose something different, something real. Together with Sophie and Grayson, I used the money to establish the Legacy Arts Foundation, a haven for young artists like me who had once been told their dreams were worthless. We transformed the old Mac Enterprises building into a sanctuary for creativity, innovation, and truth. Grayson handled operations. Sophie curated exhibits and mentored artists. I focused on vision, on making sure our foundation remained a space where no voice was silenced and no truth was hidden. At our first gallery opening, I stood among the new generation of artists. Their eyes were bright with hope, their hands stained with color and purpose. One painting caught my attention, a woman breaking free from chains, light pouring from her. I saw myself. The journey hadn't been easy. It had nearly broken me. But in that moment, I understood what my grandmother had meant all along. This was the real legacy, not wealth, not power, truth, freedom, creation, and it was finally mine to protect.